Could I first ask Fleur de Villiers and anyone else who wants to come up if they raise their name cards? Fleur de Villiers first.
Both speakers gave us much to think about, but I'd like to address my questions to the Foreign Secretary. That when addressing sectarian and ethnic mobilization, especially if it's internal rather than cross-border, the key to that, and I speak from experience in other parts of the world, is when ethnic identity is seen as the determinant factor in comparative economic and, by extension, social disadvantage. That it's very difficult to mobilize people along sectarian and ethnic lines unless you can tell them that they are poor or disadvantaged both socially and economically because of who they are. And once you've turned that trick, it's very difficult to unwind it, as you will know from Ireland, the UK's experience in Ireland. So addressing ethnic mobilization, ethnic and sectarian mobilization internally in this part of the world, surely the first steps are to ensure that economic disadvantage isn't the immediate and proximate cause. And just on another point, you laid great stress, Foreign Secretary, on democracy being a process rather than an immediate achievement. This strikes me as being distinguishing the UK's attitude to developments in this part of the world as opposed to at least some sentiment in the United States. And did I perceive in your very eloquent speech a rather desperate plea for American re-engagement? It was the desperation in the plea that interested me, particularly in the Israeli-Palestine issue, and that re-engagement should be visible rather than simply spoken. Thank you.
Baram Saleh.
Thank you, John. Thank you for wonderful presentations, but I would like to beg to differ with my very good friend, Nasser. Sectarian strife in the Middle East did not start or did not emerge with 2003. We, citizens of this part of the world, I believe we need to confront the issue head-on. Perhaps sectarian dimension of our societal life goes back a long, long time. Some people may argue 1,400 years of this struggle associated with Islam. I think probably it's fair to say that the idea of nation state that the British brought us in the early part of the 20th century, the nation builders of the time tried hard, but this project essentially was derailed by Arab nationalists and the militaries that took power, starting with Egypt, ending with Syria and Iraq. I am from Iraq. Sectarian politics and ethnic politics was very much part of our political life for decades in a profound way, because these regimes were fundamentally even talking about Arab nationalism and the ideas of modernity and so on. They were deeply and profoundly sectarian and ethnic in nature. So they did not allow the idea of this nation state based on citizenship to emerge. And I believe we all need to really confront this reality. There is a big white elephant in this part of the world called the role of religion in public life. And we need to have this debate as Middle Easterners. With that, part of the sectarian dimension will be addressed. And until we get to this type of civil society-based government, non-religious, the way that we say it, I think this issue of sectarian politics, whether we like it or not, is the inconvenient truth that we have to deal with it, unfortunately.
Ms. Ansari Moshani. Yep.
Thank you very much. Nazanin Ansari from Iran. Number one, I think sectarianism, it can be really handled if individual rights and individual self-determination is respected in all countries, regardless of gender, race, and ethnicity or religion. My question is directed to the Foreign Secretary. You mentioned that you have P5+1 has to make a credible offer to Iran. What is that credible offer, you think? And also, you said that if we don't succeed, 2013 could be a dark year. How dark could it be? Thank you.
And there was a gentleman at the back. I thought his name began with R. I couldn't quite. Yes, if you go ahead, but raise your hand so that no, but I think behind you. I've got you on the list. If there are no takers there, then yes, you, sir. All right, Al-Muhaib. Yes, go ahead.
Frédéric Charillon from the Institute of Strategic Research in
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. It's you.
It's okay. Sorry. Thank you very much. This is why my name is difficult to pronounce. My question is to Mr. Hague. He said in his presentation, and I thank him for that effort that he made to identify or explain what are sectarians and the influence of sectarian conflicts. Now, he said there are, or sectarian, the religion is one element in identifying the identity of communities or individuals. And I don't know if there are certain elements that we can combine to identify communities in the Muslim world. So my question is, are there certain procedures that the Western countries, Europeans and others, that follow in order to identify the conflicts in Muslim world, if this is sectarian or not? And the second question is a direct question. Do you see that the conflict in Bahrain happened last year is a sectarian one or not? Thank you very much.
And Nirvana Mahmood. Yes.
Right. Nirvana Mahmood from the IISS. First, a question to Foreign Minister Hague. You mentioned dialogue in Egypt, but the dialogue is clearly not working. So if you are online to President Morsi, what advice you give him? And my question to Foreign Minister Dr. Nasser Judeh. In 2013, how many governments you expect will happen in Jordan? Thank you.
Ms. Kellogg.
This is for Secretary Hague. Last week, you called the Israeli ambassador to London in for discussions about your concerns over settlement building in East Jerusalem. And I'm just wondering what he told you after listening to your concerns, what his response was. And then to Foreign Minister Judeh, you mentioned that it was very important that the U.S. inauguration happen in order for, or before the Mideast peace process gets reinvigorated. But a veteran Palestinian journalist the other day said to me that for the first time in decades, he has not covered a U.S. election because he does not think it's relevant to his issue anymore. Is that a one-off comment, or are there an increasing number of Arabs in the region who feel that the U.S. is not able or willing to drive this process forward? Thank you.
I think I'll take one more question in this round, but don't worry, I see Vitaly Namkin as well, and we want a Russian voice here, but I think we've collected quite a few points already. So might I ask first Nasser Judeh and then William Hague to answer those questions that were addressed principally to them.
Thank you very much, John. May I encourage you all, please, to continue directing most of your questions at the Foreign Secretary. I'm happy to answer my share. Dr. Barham, my good friend and a person I have so much respect for, the way you put it, I actually agree with you against myself. But that's not exactly what I meant. And what I did say, if you recall in my comments, is that there are some who argue that it began in 2003, others who argue that it began in the 70s and the 80s, and others who would like to lump it back on colonialism. And I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to absolve ourselves from our shared responsibility for what's happening in this region. And I did make it a point to say that since 2003, it perhaps became more conspicuous and more intertwined with national and regional security issues. The elements of sectarianism and ethnic and sectarian politics have certainly been there for decades, if not centuries. But we are seeing, I think, a lot of what was simmering beneath the surface suddenly burst and bubble into the surface. So it's essentially finding a way of dealing with that, rejecting that as a source of instability and factors of instability in our region, and trying to look at national identities rather than ethnic or religious identities. Dr. Mahmoud, Ms. Mahmoud, sorry, you called me a doctor. I'm not a doctor. How many Jordanian governments will we see in 2013? I can't tell you. But we have a constitution and we follow the letter of the constitution. And I think this is very much an essential component of democracy. Yes, we have frequent governments in Jordan. This has always been a traditional and well-deserved reputation, I should say. But if you recall, the new changes to our constitution require that when parliament is dissolved, the government of the day resigns. And this is what happened in the last month. Before that, there was a government that almost had to face a vote of no confidence in parliament, and it had to resign. This is part of a vibrant democratic process. I think the measure of how progressive the Jordanian reform program, that again is led from the top, is not the frequency of governments. It is the achievements on the ground. And if you look at what Jordan has done in the last 2 years, I mean, I don't want to go back and say that we have preempted Arab Spring by embarking on a political and economic and social reform program way before the Arab Spring. But let us say that in the last 2 years, we have changed 1/3 of our constitution. It takes a lot of confidence to do that in our part of the world. We have enacted laws. We have set up the constitutional institutions like the Independent Elections Commission, which does not report to the judiciary, does not report to parliament, does not report to government, totally independent. It sets the date of the elections. It oversees and conducts the election. The government, the judiciary, the parliament have nothing to do with the elections anymore. And then we're going to elections. So look at the chronology. 1/3 of the constitution is changed. The laws are enacted, the institutions are set up, and then you go to elections, which are going to happen on 23rd of January. And it has been made very, very clear that this is the beginning of parliamentary governments. This is the beginning of 4-year term governments. So, you know, we're heading in the right direction. And again, don't measure us by the frequency of governments, but measure us by the achievements on the ground. I didn't say, ma'am, that the American inauguration or the inauguration of the re-elected president is a prerequisite for, I just mentioned it as a milestone to reinvigorate the peace process. And I hesitate to say process because I think, as His Majesty King Abdullah II said, we've had too much process and not enough peace. But what I believe, if I may presume to speak on behalf of the Foreign Secretary and myself, because we share this view, we believe that we have these milestones ahead of us. We have the inauguration of the president, which is going to happen, it's a fact, and we have the Israeli election, which is taking place on the 22nd of January. And realistically, you're not going to see a serious traction on the ground ahead of these two dates. What we are saying is that we should all now be in serious thinking mode to find a workable formula that will enable us, once we have these two milestones behind us, to enable us to launch negotiations immediately and not wait till after these two milestones to start thinking about what needs to be done. There's no shortage of excuses in our part of the world not to do something. I can find you 1,000 excuses every day for not resuming the peace process, for not resuming negotiations. But I think it takes boldness and courage and creative thinking, especially by the stakeholders, regionally and internationally, to accept that it is only through negotiations that we will have true peace in our part of the world. what the Palestinians want, which is an independent, viable, territorially contiguous state, sovereign on their national soil, and security not just for Israel, but for the entire region. So what the Palestinian journalist who told you asked me if this was a one-off. I don't know if it was a one-off, but it's certainly one person saying it. I believe that the vast majority of Palestinians want to see substantive negotiations resume on all final status issues. And let us not be naive. I think the U.S. Role is a leading role in this, with all of us in the region doing the heavy lifting as well, is badly needed. Thank you so much.
William Hague.
Thank you very much. Well, I won't intervene in the historical debate between Nasser and Mr. Barham Saleh about whether things started in 2003. I suspect they go back a long way before then, but I will leave that to them. But to take Fleur's questions, first of all, about the links between sectarian division and economic disadvantage. Well, I think there is very often a link. I wouldn't say that's an exclusive correlation. Sectarian division can also be caused by fear, and including the fear of losing some asset or economic advantage. Nevertheless, economic disadvantage is often a contributing factor, and I'm sure one of the ways forward for societies that have undergone dramatic upheavals and change across the Middle East and North Africa in recent years is to place a great emphasis on economic growth. If you think of Egypt now and the real need to address financial issues, to show that the economy can grow again, to build stronger economic and trading links with Europe, this has got to be looked at from the outside, the top priority of any government. And so, yeah, to that extent, that there is an important link. Yes, the point about democracy being a process, not a single event, is an important one. I'm not holding that up as a difference between the UK and the United States. I think that view would be widely shared in America as well. And my appeal for American engagement on the peace process is, well, I hope it's not meant to sound desperate. I hope you asked whether it was desperate, but it's, I'm trying to make it sound very clear. There are many things in the relations between the UK and the United States which is a special and intensely close relationship which we keep between us, which are our own private relations. But this one is not one to keep private, that we call on the United States to make an extraordinary effort over the coming months on the Middle East peace process. It's not one to keep private because we want others to join in, urging the United States to do that. We want the whole body politic of the United States to feel that, not just the administration. And so I say not only to Hillary Clinton, but I also say in our parliament that we need from the United States in particular an effort of an intensity we haven't seen since the Oslo Peace Accords in the coming months. Because time really is running out, and announcements such as we've seen in the last week about opening up for development in Area E1 in the West Bank show that time is running out. And in that regard, just to link that with other questions on this same subject, somebody asked, what did the Israeli ambassador say when summoned to the British Foreign Office? Well, he said he would convey what he'd been told to his government, like a jolly good ambassador. That was what you would expect him to say. But clearly we urge all concerned, we urge Israelis and Palestinians back into negotiations. So I absolutely agree with what Nasser Judeh has just been saying about this. On questions about, someone asked about Iran and what is a credible offer. Well, we've made many credible offers to Iran, but clearly after 3 substantive rounds of negotiation in 2012, we haven't had a credible response. We haven't had a realistic response. I can't give any details of any forthcoming negotiation. Indeed, we haven't yet agreed to have a forthcoming negotiation. But we are discussing among the E3+3 or P5+1 how we now approach this subject of negotiations with Iran. I think it's very important for Iranian leaders to know two important things. One is that we're not seeking regime change. Indeed, the offers that are made in these negotiations come from the P5+1. That includes Russia and China. And the United States has made it very clear in those negotiations that the regime change is not the goal of the Western world. We are seeking to solve the nuclear issue. That's it in those negotiations. But they should be equally clear in Iran that we are not going to relax our efforts. We have imposed from the European Union the most comprehensive sanctions we've ever imposed, and they are having quite an effect in conjunction with the sanctions of other nations on Iran. And we will go on intensifying those sanctions. It's important that Iranian leaders don't think that because there are economic problems in the Western world that we will not have the strength or resolve to maintain and intensify such pressure, because we will certainly do so. And that is the background to negotiations which should, further negotiations which should take place. That links to the question the same person asked about 2013, how dark could it be? I don't really want to, this would sound utterly apocalyptic if we describe just how dark could the future be, because of course there are many sources of optimism, as I was trying to point to in my speech. But if in the coming year we don't make progress on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and see a resolution of the crisis in Syria and make progress on the Iranian nuclear program, well then we have three crises, all to some extent connected to each other, which will make for a pretty dark situation 12 months from now. So we have to be very energetic about tackling all of those three issues. Just quickly on the other points, what advice do we give to the president of Egypt? Well, I don't believe in giving daily tactical advice to other governments. It's really the advice we give in Egypt is what I said earlier about urging all parties to work through this peacefully and inclusively and give enough space and time to each other to debate these issues and maintain dialogue with each other. Do we have procedures in the West for defining sectarian conflict in the Middle? No, I think we just have to know it when we see it. There are no strict procedures for that, but is Bahrain, the difficulty, the internal issues in Bahrain sectarian in nature? Well, they are on sectarian lines, so yes. And they can be resolved, just as we have seen ourselves in Northern Ireland. Such difficulties can be resolved. So I think that covers the questions that I was asked, and I hope it's not too apocalyptic and depressing to listen to the answers.
Thanks very much. Well, you've certainly encouraged still a lot more people to engage with you. Ragida Dergam, and I've got the others on the list too.
Secretary Hague, can I ask you to kindly, it's here, right?
Oh, there.
All right. May I ask you to fine-tune some of your answers, please, if it's called follow-up in my part of the world. You said that you would like the United States to engage. And the question to you on the Palestinian-Israeli issue, are you Europeans and you, the UK in particular, ready to use your own tools that are available to you to stand against what you called illegal settlements by the Israelis? And when you spoke of the need to take a look at the neighbors of Syria and make sure that things don't go into the dark days of 2013, are you doing something for a country as fragile as Lebanon? And given, of course, the Iranian role there, you know that you have in your hands tools in the Security Council, at least to put the issue of violation of Chapter 7 resolution, which prohibits Iran from sending arms and and equipment outside of their own. So they're doing that. If you think they're not, tell me. In Syria, for example, why won't you bring this up in the Security Council? Is it the Russian thing? And speaking of the Russian, are you talking about a grand bargain with them, or just narrowly about the day after in Syria? Thank you.
And from Turkey, Mr. Karakolucu, I'm sorry, I'm bound to mispronounce your name, but I'm glad you've identified yourself. Please go ahead.
I think you did a great job. It's Karakolucu from Global Relations Forum, Istanbul, Turkey. I am trying to gauge, measure European and Western concern about developing sectarianism in the region. And I'm trying to find the metric for it. When I look at the problem, as was actually mentioned before, I think at the core of it is the gap between the economic, the prosperity expectations of the populations and the actual delivery. As that gap widens, the leadership in these countries are bound to either go down the route of authoritarianism or identity politics. That's the only way to compensate, in my mind at least. And when they do that, then the Western capital is disinterested, so it doesn't move in, so the gap never narrows down back again. From outside, it seems the two things we can do, either we deal with managing the expectations of the population or help with the delivery of prosperity. Again, in my little model, if those two are the levers we have, then I go back and ask the question, have we been taking the leap of faith in terms of providing capital to these countries after the revolutions? And in terms of the Deauville numbers, which have not been realized, compared to the other European crises in terms of magnitude, order of magnitude, the numbers and delivery, it just doesn't seem sufficient. So to me, when I try to figure out the significance with which European friends and Americans look at these sectarian conflicts, my conclusion is that the concern is simply not that deep. Would you agree?
Field Marshal Guthrie, Charles Guthrie.
Thank you very much, John. I thought we had two marvelous talks then, and I would agree with almost every single word. I do think, however, we want to remember that there's no template for any particular scenario. They're all slightly different and need a different approach. I'm all for dialogue, I'm all for peace talks, I'm all for understanding, and that is what we should aim for. But there are occasions when you really do have to create an atmosphere so that you can have peace talks, you can find somebody to talk to. I will give you 3 examples I was involved in. Sierra Leone, the Balkans and Kosovo, which people had to go in, and we couldn't go on talking. And in our own Northern Ireland, William, I slightly disagree with you, because I think the reason why things were able to be sorted out more or less is because successive governments and the army have been absolutely determined. And we weren't able to talk to people, but we were able to demonstrate to the IRA that it was much better for them to go to the ballot box rather than the bullet, and they came away from the violence. It is, I think, enormously dangerous to move, however, into other people's countries. It's enormously dangerous to think by putting a peacekeeping force on top of 2 warring factions, they're going to stop warring, and they may even turn on you instead. So we have to be very careful. I would just say, sometimes you have to do other things rather than just peacekeeping and talking. Thank you.
Minister Dimistura from Italy.
Thank you. One question to Secretary Hague, William, and one to you, Nasser, if I may. Regarding the first one is about Syria. Let's have a minimum of a brainstorming on one point. We have not heard any Russian colleagues yet taking the floor, or perhaps we will. But imagine there was one, and perhaps it will be. I remember asking the Russians, who are, according to many of us, the key for, or one major key for finding a solution in Syria. The answer was, well, point number 1, we were very annoyed about what happened in Libya because a Security Council resolution went too far, further than we expected. Point number 2, you are unwittingly creating the opportunity for extreme Al-Qaedic type of formula to take place there. And 3, they don't say so, but perhaps if you really ask them, we are interested in keeping some of our interest in the area. So my question to you, Secretary of Hague, would be, what would be your answer to those points that the Russians are raising or not raising regarding their lack yet of intense involvement in the solution of the Syrian problem? To Minister Judeh, could I remind myself and yourself that before being in the Italian government, I was special envoy in Afghanistan. And in that occasion, I remember not more than a year ago, meeting some people very close to the Taliban, because we were trying to find formulas. We still continue doing so. And some of them were probably not very far from Al-Qaeda type of sympathies. And I remember in their eyes astonishment, shock, horror when the word Arab Spring came up. What? Someone else is doing a revolution. They're not burning American flags. They're not burning Israeli flags. They're just talking about jobs, young people wanting a better future. And the message was, we will be able soon to catch up and infiltrate the DNA of those Arab Springs, because we want to keep the leadership in this. Are you detecting that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now ask Vitaly Namkin to come in, because there's been so much comment on Russia, and Vitaly is probably the leading expert on the Middle East in Russia. So do take a minute to explain your government's position on Syria, if you like, or anything that you want to ask the two gentlemen on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm not going to explain anything here, but I'm ready to do that any other time. But I have a question to Secretary Hague on Iran. So Iran is blamed for fueling ethnic and sectarian tensions, for seeking a nuclear device, and the Israelis blame Iran for having orchestrated recent missile attacks on Israel from Al-Gaza. You mentioned the necessity to intensify sanctions against Iran. In case these sanctions, of course, in order to make it change its policies, in case these sanctions do not work, what other options are on the table? I mean, not exactly your table, but some other tables as well. And what do you think about Mr. Brzezinski's view that the risks of military operation against Iran are much higher than the risks of containing a nuclear Iran? Thank you.
There was someone in the back row there who's a name tag. Yes, you, sir. If you could give us your name, and then, yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chipman. My name is Asad Al-Shamlan. I am from Saudi Arabia. I enjoyed very much the presentations of the two distinguished presenters. Now, of course, it will be really reckless to try to find a single cause for the phenomenon of sectarianism, and therefore there will be also no simple solution to that. However, I want to submit that we live today in a paradox vis-à-vis the phenomenon of sectarianism in the region. Everyone condemns it. I mean, I haven't heard anyone in the public sphere who is not against sectarianism and find it abhorrent and detrimental to the region. Yet at the same time, we witness the rise of sectarianism. So there is obviously a disconnect between the public discourse and what actually goes on the ground. And also it means that mere condemnation is not enough, that there has to be something beyond moral indignation and condemnation of the phenomena. And given that, I mean, we have the UK here and Jordan, and let me just say something that everyone knows. UK was accused of fueling sectarianism during its experience with Iraq. I mean, justly or unjustly, that's a different question, but there has been a connection between the UK and the fueling of sectarianism. Jordan also, unfortunately, has been associated with that, you know, the unfortunate phrase of the Shia crescent, etc. My question really is, what is specifically the UK specifically is doing to try to quell the rise of sectarianism? And what Jordan is doing as well. And just to put a point of comparison, if we compare that to Saudi Arabia, for example, which is customarily accused as being a source of sectarian tension, we have King Abdullah proposing the interfaith dialogue in Vienna. He also announced during the last Islamic summit an intersectarian center for dialogue. So there are specific measures to try to get hold of this phenomena. My question is, what is the UK and Jordan, beyond moral condemnation, are doing or planning to do to quell the rise of sectarianism? Thank you.
Mr. Butter. Sorry, I know there's about 14 still on the list, and I'm trying to respect.
Thank you. Nasser Judeh mentioned creative thinking. Wouldn't it be true that one of the issues that is crying out for creative thinking when we're talking about the Palestine-Israel conflict is to look at the quartet conditions for bringing Hamas into the equation? We heard from General Guthrie, I believe, about how there was this question of bullets and ballot boxes. You could argue perhaps in Hamas's case that the policies of the West have acted as an incentive towards Hamas to turn more to the bullet than to the ballot box after their previous experience. And certainly I think there have been some changes inside Hamas at the moment. There have been some indications from them that they are more interested now in talking to Fatah, and that certainly these things should really be explored as a matter of urgency, because otherwise any diplomacy about the two-state solution would lack credibility in my view.
Mr. Wiewski. You had been on my list. All right, Mr. Almani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Hague. The first really is related to the role of Russia in Syria. Some people in this part of the world were hoping about 6 months ago that Russia would really act politically in Syria, perhaps by engineering a sort of a coup d'etat in Syria and removing al-Assad, and therefore creating some sort of leadership that the people of a new leadership in Syria, that the people of Syria could really coalesce around and support. Do you think that that window of opportunity for Russia has really gone, and perhaps the chance of Russia playing a larger role is dwindling with time? My second question really regarding the Iranian nuclear file. How much of the negotiation, the process of the negotiation, the 5+1, are you allowing or discussing with the GCC states? The GCC states are neighbors to Iran. The file is very important for the GCC states, yet they are not treated like the North Korean file. The North Korean file, all the regional states have been brought into the negotiations and associated with that negotiations. In the GCC, we do not see a similar course. Could you please explain on that level? Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman with the glasses with his hand up, if you could give us your name. Thank you so much.
It's Faisal Abbas from Al Arabiya News Channel in Dubai. I just would like to question one part of Mr. Hague's speech earlier. When you talked about religion or sectarian views being one part of the aspect, I mean, I only wish this was true in this part of the world. In the United Kingdom, for example, the opposition, everybody knows, is called the Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. And people in general are, and the system is at ease with having an opposition, because it is assumed that one party's mandate might not necessarily be correct, and then the best argument would win. But how could you possibly apply that in a region where a party calls itself the party of God, or if somebody believes that the wishes of the Ayatollah or the General Murshid is over and above national interest?
Thank you very much. And there's Mr. Singh, I think. Yes? Yes, you go ahead.
Yeah. Admiral Singh from India, obviously. My question is that the point was made by Secretary Hague that countries in the region are going to be seriously affected for the security situation that has emerged. What I would like to know, no mention has been made of OIC. Has this issue featured in their discussion? And if not, why?
And I apologize to those who I haven't been able to include, and I hope in our concluding plenary tomorrow, those who I've left out, I will give absolute priority to, if I can, sit close to the front if you can and make certain to catch my eye. But the last question from Abdulaziz Al-Saga.
Thank you, John. Well, I'm not going to ask about sectarianism because I don't think both ministers are either a Shia or a Salafi. But my question is very simple. I think the first question I start with the Minister Nasser Judeh. Jordan is facing a lot of stress because they've been welcoming a lot of the Iraqi, the Palestinian from Iraq, and now we have the Syrian refugee. How far Jordan can take that? And at the same time, is the GCC country doing much to help Jordan? And is there any precondition has been imposed in Jordan, i.e., for instance, accepting all the Palestinians from Syria, to settle in Jordan? Is that a precondition? Did any country in the region have mentioned that to you? And are you satisfied with the level of support you're getting from the GCC country? And my second question to Secretary Hague, Prince Saud al-Faisal, the Saudi foreign minister, said the coalition is an interesting step toward unifying the opposition in Syria. That means Saudi have not recognized the new coalition, the Doha, new coalition officially as representative of the Syrian. How far there's a great cooperation between UK, Saudi, the US, and the other in supporting really the Syrian opposition? And to what extent UK is willing to do sharing of intelligence information with the Syrian Free Army to help them to overcount or to offset the Russian support to the Syrian government? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, that's an extraordinary menu of questions and points of view. Each of our two speakers has 6 minutes and 30 seconds each in order to bring this elegantly to a conclusion by our stop time of 6:40 in order to allow future commitments to be held. So I'll ask Nasser Judeh first and then close with William Hague. Nasser.
Thank you very much. I have 6 minutes and 10 seconds left. You just took 20 seconds off my time, but thank you very much, John. My dear friend, Mr. de Mistura, you're asking if we are detecting, as we speak, if I got your question right, Al-Qaeda or other extremist organizations jumping on the bandwagon of the Arab Spring. I mean, I believe that this is what you meant. I mean, I don't have any tangible information on specific cases or incidents, but certainly in any environment of instability, the ground is very fertile for extremism to flourish and to find new recruits or to find turf for its current recruits. So we're seeing that in different countries. I think the most important thing, I mean, just to take the conversation on a parallel track, if I may, it was said when the Arab Spring erupted in different, or Arab awakenings, as I prefer to call them, in different countries, that, this is not about, just to go back to what somebody from Taliban told somebody from your setup, it was not about the Arab-Israeli conflict. And yes, you're not seeing, it was argued actually by many people that you're not seeing flags being burnt, Israeli flags or whatever it is. And we were quick to say that while the Arab awakenings are all about the search for dignity and opportunity and a share and responsibility in shaping one's own future in different countries, but it is one day going to be about the dignity of the Palestinian people and their right also to statehood and the right of all the states in the region for security, and a life that is dignified and prosperity in the region, because it's all about opportunity. When we say, all of us, that the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli dimension of the Arab-Israeli conflict in particular, is the core issue, what we mean is that in the absence of that peace, in the absence of the implementation of the two-state solution, then this region as a whole is not going to prosper, and opportunities will not be provided, and the youth will continue to be extremely desperate and not able to unleash their vast potential. So I think I mean, I don't know if I've answered your question. I certainly have tried, but at the end of the day, you have to have stability in order to deprive extremism from taking root in these atmospheres of instability. Sir, regarding what you said Jordan is doing or not doing about sectarianism, the statement that you referred to, the Shiite Crescent, was not an unfortunate statement. It was a statement that reflected the reality on the ground at the time. It was a fact. And the objective behind the statement at the time was to do exactly the opposite of what you're suggesting, which is to try and put an end to the concept of sectarianism and try to contain it in a political way rather than on the ground. So, I mean, I just want to say that initiatives such as the ones we took in Jordan, like the Amman Message or the Common Word Initiative, and initiatives such as the one that were taken by King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz, the custodian, with the interfaith and bringing all the Muslim sects together, are very, very important. It's not just about moral condemnation or moral this or moral that. It's about doing something on the ground in order to change this notion. Regarding the Quartet initiative and how it relates to the Quartet conditions, and how it relates to creative thinking, and if Hamas will move from the bullet to the ballot. The most important thing, I think, at this stage is to have a united, cohesive Palestinian house that is able to negotiate effectively with Israel. And yes, Hamas got to power through the ballot, and then you had a division, and look where we are today. At the end of the day, it is one Palestinian side that will and should be negotiating with Israel, and that Palestinian side has to believe in the two-state solution and the parameters that we're all in agreement over, meaning an independent Palestinian state that lives next door to an Israel, both living in security and in peace, and the whole region enjoying peace. So I don't know what efforts there are underway now in the field of Palestinian reconciliation, but I'm sure this is very much on their minds. Thank you very much, sir.
William Hague.
Well, I start by very much agreeing with Nasser's last point in answer to the question about Hamas. We do need to see Palestinian reconciliation as a very important part of any successful peace process. But let me go, since time is limited, quickly on to some of the questions about the nature of sectarian parties and so on. There was a question at the back about how could you have a party system like the British party system if one party calls itself the party of God and so on. If it's any consolation, we have been through all this in Europe in the past. Hundreds of years ago, in the case of Britain, if you go back long enough, the defining issue in British political life was religious affiliation. That stopped around about the mid-18th century when any external threat based on religion stopped. And then British politics was no longer defined by religion. British people then helped, rather, by becoming a lot less religious over that time, which has also contributed to the change in the situation. But there's been such a change across Europe. We have our German colleague who is here as part of the Christian Democrat Party. But they have long since passed the point in the Christian Democrat Party where their overriding agenda is religious. Nor are they exclusive in any way to Christians. Parties adapt, meeting the economic and security challenges of their countries, and take on different forms over time. And I think in the age of far more rapid communication and development of ideas than in those previous centuries, such adaptation and evolution can happen much more quickly than in the past, accepting the fact that there will always be differences between the cultural basis of these things in the Middle East and in Europe. But nevertheless, you should take heart from what's happened over the years in the European example. I think that there was a related point about managing expectations, delivering prosperity. This is very, very important indeed. It's important for Western nations to help. The point was made about Deauville hasn't delivered anything or very much. Actually, we will have the presidency of the G8 in the coming year. It's very important that the Deauville partnership delivers on some specific projects in that time. We will be focused on that. But the main thing that has to be done in every country about attracting business and growth and prosperity is within that country. We are in an intense global race now for competitiveness. And that's what most economies and most governments are devoting themselves to at the moment, reducing their business taxes, simplifying the rules of doing business in their country, making sure they attract foreign investment. And it's very, very important, of course, that in North Africa, that governments set about that in a very competitive and aggressive way. Much of the answer to this lies within each country, not just from external assistance. I think there was a point, yes, there was a related point to that. What are we doing to encourage, Mr. Al-Shamlan asked about, to combat sectarianism in the Middle East, which we are concerned about. For someone else asked, are we concerned? Yes, we are concerned, because instability in the Middle East dramatically affects us in Europe, and we have countless examples of that over the last few decades. But what are we doing about it? Well, we're engaged at the moment in our biggest drive to boost trade and investment between our own country and the countries of this region that we have ever embarked upon. We have our Arab Partnership Fund that is running, that is a £110 million program, running projects in most of the countries of North Africa, supporting civil society, training people in how to take part in elections, encouraging a non-sectarian approach to politics with the permission of the governments concerned. We do a lot to try to build capacity to respect human rights, to have judicial independence in countries which have had internal difficulties, so that those things can be respected in the future. So the UK is engaged, those are just examples, engaged in many different ways in trying to address these problems. Just to quickly pick on there were several questions about Iran. The question about how do we choose between military options on Iran or containing a nuclear Iran? Well, you only have to ask the question to see how we must avoid coming to that point. All our efforts must be to deliver a peaceful diplomatic solution based on negotiations, and that requires sanctions. That's the rationale for our policy, but we have taken no option off the table in the policy of the United Kingdom. We certainly raise the export by Iran of weapons to other areas. We've raised that with the Iraqi government in the case of flights into Syria, and will continue to do so. We're not able to pass a resolution to clamp down on this at the UN because of the difficulty of passing a resolution on Syria. And perhaps that's the final thing, given the time, that I should address. There were questions about Syria, about the coordination of policy, sharing of intelligence. I can't comment, I'm afraid, on any intelligence sharing issue that is obviously secret, but we will be gathering, many nations will be gathering, including the US, European nations, Saudi Arabia, at the Friends of Syria meeting in Marrakesh on Wednesday, and I hope there will be an effective and strongly coordinated response to the situation, including of strong support for the national coalition, which countries will deliver in different ways. And I think that has covered most of the... there was the question about, Stefan de Misture's question about I'll just finish with that. What answer do we give to the Russian concerns about Syria? And the answer is that as this goes on, and gets worse in Syria, all the things that you, Russia, are most concerned about are actually getting worse. And therefore, it is necessary to join together in trying to bring about to drive a diplomatically agreed, peaceful transition, and to bring about a transitional government in Syria based on the Geneva principles. And so we will keep having that argument. And we're having it now. I met the Russian Foreign Minister 2 days ago. And I think it's very important not to raise any hopes at the moment of any agreement. But if the Russian attitude on this has been a brick wall for a long time, I think it's now a brick wall with a small crack in it. And therefore, we will keep having this. We'll keep having this debate.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll give 30 seconds to Nasser Judeh to answer the question on the GCC, and then I'll close.
Thank you very much. I'm totally sorry. It was on the next page and I didn't see it. Regarding the GCC, first of all, in terms of help and the relationship between Jordan and the GCC, of course, you know that we are in serious discussion now to elevate the status of our already excellent relationship with the countries of the GCC to strategic cooperation and strategic partnership. And we had meetings, and there are committees being formed in different sectors to follow up on that, tackling across the board issues like the economy and legal affairs and cultural cooperation, trade, and etc. Now, as a result of this initiative in the last year, we have had an announcement by the GCC countries to allocate $5 billion over 5 years to support project development in Jordan. And we are receiving now the first annual installments in this context, and this is, of course, something that will help us a great deal. I just want to say that we are facing serious economic challenges in Jordan, and the GCC has always stood by Jordan and will continue to do so, and this is much appreciated. But are there conditions, strings attached? I don't know where this notion of accepting Palestinians coming in from Syria or Iraq came. It certainly is not on the table, was never asked for us, and I think Jordan's credentials in hosting the largest number of Palestinian refugees and other waves of refugees are well known. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't think you could accuse either of these two politicians of avoiding questions to put to them. They were meticulous in making certain everyone put to them was given a proper answer. Thank you to both of you for very wide-ranging speeches and for your engagement with this audience. Let me remind this audience, before you give a very fulsome applause to our two speakers, that there is an informal dinner tonight in the gazebo, a reception starting at 1900, and that the simultaneous special sessions tomorrow morning are all off the record, and the delegates who have registered for them must take their seats by 9:15, otherwise remaining seats will be taken on a first-come, first-served basis. But please, in closing, thank very warmly Foreign Minister Judeh and Secretary of State William Hague.